if I want to do it in 2024, but it's a good way to give it a
Hello, everybody. It is Monday, November 6th, 2023. Thank you for joining us for episode 65 of the Old Men Magic podcast. Alex?
Steve?
As you know, I did a pause. I thought you were going to come right back with the Steve, and then you didn't come back right away with the Steve, and there was too much dead air, and then I was like, this is too much dead air, and then I started talking, and right when I started talking again, you came back with the Steve.
That's what happened.
What I was going to say was, we spent the last couple of weeks reviewing some of the best zombie creatures in the pre-modern Magic card pool. When we were doing so, we found another card that is of great interest to us. That card is often found in decks full of non-zombie cards. It is not a creature card. It has an interesting mechanic, and it just so happens to generate the zombie tokens. So we are sort of talking about zombies again, but not totally. The card, by the way, that we're going to focus on today is Zombie Infestation. That is our main topic for episode 65 of the Old Men Magic podcast. But before we get into the main topic, we have some follow-ups. First follow-up, Alex, is Bone Dancer. This is a zombie that we talked about. It is a reserve list card from Weatherlight. It's a creature. It's a 2/2 summon zombie. And when Bone Dancer is on the battlefield, you can pay 0 to put the top creature of defending player's graveyard into play under your control. Bone Dancer deals no combat damage this turn. Use this ability only if Bone Dancer is attacking and unblocked, and only once each turn. So when I read this card, for some reason, even though it's really clear, I was under the impression that it wouldn't work unless the top card of your graveyard was a creature. And you pointed out to me, you're like, no, Steve, read the card. Read it again. Read it a third time. You pointed out that really the way it's worded, it indicates that you can steal a creature from their, whatever the top creature card is in their graveyard, you can steal it with Bone Dancer. The top card of their graveyard does not have to be a creature. Whatever the top creature card is in their graveyard, even if there's non-creature spells above it, you can steal that creature. Just to clarify, you brought that up. We talked about it for a little bit in the pod. We all thought you were right. It seemed pretty clear. Just to confirm that you are right, Googled it a little bit after the pod. Viper-esque from mtgsalvation.com on the message board says the top creature card of your graveyard is the first card from the top of your graveyard that is a creature. It is only looked at the top card of your graveyard, full stop. Didn't read that very well. If it only looked at the top card of your graveyard, full stop, it would say so, i.e. Bosium Strip. Not i.e. e.g. Bosium Strip. I threw in the i.e. even though it clearly says e.g. Different things. But yeah, that is true. If it just meant the top card of your graveyard, it would specify that. And there are other cards like that in Magic that do only interact with the top card of your graveyard, like Bosium Strip, and they do specify that in the text of the card Bosium Strip. Just wanted to bring this up because somebody else had this same kind of confusion that I did.
Oh, it's interesting that Bosium Strip is from Weatherlight too, because I was going to say this is back far enough though that the wording might just be sloppy or something, but it's cool that there's a card from the same set that you can compare it to.
Made me feel a little bit better that Waiting in the Weeds was also a little bit confused about this, but Waiting in the Weeds, when he made this post, he was probably like 12, 13 years old, so I don't really have much excuse. Let's look at Bosium Strip real quick. Brief detour. Bosium Strip, another reserve list card from Weatherlight. Card that I always...
Strips? I feel like you were talking about it at one point.
Yeah, we talked about it. I always wanted to make it work. I always wanted to put it in a blue-red deck just to get more usage out of my counter spells, but it's just really so mana inefficient that it'll stay in for like a game or two, and then I'll take it out, and then I'll try it again. Until end of turn, if at any time the top card in your graveyard is an instant, interrupt, or sorcery card. Yeah, the top card in your graveyard. Anyways,
All right. Well, I'm glad you looked that up.
one follow-up. Oh, no, I wanted to, when looking up Bone Dancer too, I also came across this random Reddit post. I remembered because we brought up Bone Dancer and we were like, oh, look at that price spike when everything weird was happening. And it was up to $10, even though not many people really play this card. This was one of the many reserved list buyouts. It was also brought to people's attention on MTG Finance. Bone Dancer, potential looming buyout, best-selling card of the day according to TCG Player. Everybody's buying their damn Bone Dancers. And it was good to see a lot of the people in the comments be like, this is just stupid. Stop putting all your money into reserve list cardboard that isn't even that rare and that people don't even play that often. Settle down, people. But then, of course, there's also somebody in here that goes, I bought 100 of these for about $3 each in 2018. It would be nice to finally feel okay about that decision. It just makes me wonder how many people all across the country and also all across the world just have hundreds of copies of just like random reserve list cards because they're like, this is reserve list. Eventually, like all the really old reserve list cards, this too will 50x and I'll be rich and I'll be able to retire from my copies of Bone Dancer. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah. Bought 100 of these.
If this person bought 100 copies of Bone Dancer too, it's not the only random reserve list cards from like Mirage or Weatherlight or Visions that they have like 100 or more copies.
Yeah.
Just thought that was funny. One other follow-up. I have a second follow-up. It's about a card called Call to the Grave. This might be a card that you brought up to me before, and then I since forgot. But I saw it over the weekend when I was thinking more about zombies. We didn't talk about it, I don't think, during our zombie episodes.
Oh, I don't think so.
I wanted to bring this up as something that would be a great utility card for a dedicated zombie deck. It's first printed in Scourge. It's a rare from Scourge. It's 4 colorless, 1 black, so, pretty high casting cost, but, Dark Ritual this shit out, whatever. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-zombie creature. At end of turn, if no creatures are in play, sacrifice Call to the Grave.
Okay.
So I thought this would be pretty cool, actually. Maybe to sideboard in when you're going toe-to-toe with some other creature horde deck, like Stompy, like Goblins. Because we were going through all these zombie creatures, and I was thinking it'd be really fun to make a Premodern zombie deck. And I do think they can be pretty strong. But against the most competitive clan builds, Goblins especially, I think eventually the zombies just get overwhelmed. Like, they don't have as many tools as the Goblin deck. Part of the reason that the Goblin deck, I think, in Premodern is so strong is because over the years and throughout the Premodern card pool, they printed all sorts of utilities goblins that do like just about everything.
They tutor, they do direct damage.
Exactly. And they all synergize, so you don't have to put cards that have effects into your deck if you want those effects that that aren't goblins. So you get the best of both worlds. You can pack your deck full of cards that synergize with one another, and at the same time get cards that aren't just creatures but can have spell-like effects, like you said, do direct damage, to tutor, to provide card draw advantage, like the Goblin Ringleader, etc., etc. And I'm like, okay, if you're just playing a different creature horde deck, how do you match up against that? Zombie had some of those tools. They have a Lord effect. They had direct damage through the Gem Palm Incinerator that you can at least do to your opponent, not opponent or creatures, but direct to your opponent. They have lots of zombies that you can sacrifice.
Yeah, they have some sack effects. They have some minus counter effects. Yeah.
But overall, not quite as strong as the goblins. But you bring in Call to the Grave. Sideboard this in maybe against goblins. Maybe this can start to make the matchup a little bit more fair. If every upkeep you can keep putting out more zombies, and every upkeep they have to get rid of a goblin. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that helping. Like yeah, it's just, I guess, a question of what other creature removal would you want to play instead, because with black you have options, you know.
You do have options.
But I like that this is down and it's steady, you know, and it keeps
Exactly.
working. You don't have to worry about, maybe them having black or artifact creatures that you can't hit with certain spells, or what black spells have limitations on what they can do with their removal, usually.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I like this. You're gonna have zombies down.
You're gonna have zombies. The only thing is, so you said, okay, black has creature removal. That is true. Now, if you have this down, it's an enchantment, so you can potentially 2 for 1, 3 for 1, 4 for 1 if it doesn't get removed from the board. If it stays for multiple upkeeps, it can be used to get rid of more than one creature. But now I'm thinking, is it not going to get removed? Yeah. In black, in your zombie deck, how many other disenchant or naturalized targets are going to be in your deck? Your opponent's probably going to be running at least 2 or more. A lot of people run at least 2 or more just standard in their decks just to deal with all sorts of things they might see. Is this just going to be the one disenchant target that you're going to have in your deck? So it's just going to get removed every time you put it down. That's a possibility.
I mean, there's some other. I mean, I'm thinking. I keep thinking back to like using graveyard synergy with some of these goblins. So something like Oversold Cemetery, I might have down. Grave Pact. Remember that card?
Yeah.
Grave Pact. Whenever it's an enchantment, whenever any creature you control is put into any graveyard. Did I read that right? Whenever any creature you control is put into any graveyard, each other player sacrifices a creature. So it kind of does a similar thing where it's like, sitting down there as an enchantment and destroying one of their creatures, like, periodically. You could play a blend of Grave Pact and I forgot what we were just talking about.
Call to the Grave.
Let's call it Call to the Grave, yeah.
I somehow just X'd out of all my windows.
Restore all windows.
Shit. So yeah.
And then, I don't know, maybe something like Phyrexian Arena or something you might have down for card draw.
That's true. I did think about trying Phyrexian Arena on my zombie list. Maybe get rid of some of the zombies that do damage to me and just put in an arena for card draw, card advantage. I don't want to get rid of all the zombies that could do damage to me. The Carnophage might do some damage to me. We talked about several, zombies that can do damage to you. You don't want to have too many of them in your deck and end up suiciding yourself consistently. You could run into that issue, definitely, if you pack Phyrexian Arena on top of those zombies. But I did think about, removing some of those zombies and adding an arena. And maybe some other zombies that you might replace them with. They might not be as powerful because they won't have that drawback. But now you have the card draw advantage provided by Phyrexian Arena. So that's a trade-off. It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
But yeah, Call of the Grave.
Sorry, go ahead.
Call of the Grave, this would just be a sideboard card for me, really. I want to try it against certain matchups. Other creature horde decks that I feel like I can't go toe-to-toe with. If I'm sitting down against, somebody on the other side of the battlefield. They keep playing creatures, either more creatures than I'm able to consistently put out with my zombie deck, or bigger creatures that I'm able to consistently deal with my zombie deck. I'd like to give Call to the Grave a try.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I wonder if there's some way too you could play with maybe something to like bring Call of the Grave back into play if it gets destroyed, Get some targeted like graveyard regrowthing going, or something else that brings enchantments back
I don't know.
if you're that worried about it.
Yeah,
I see
I
what
don't
you mean
know.
about it being a sideboard, because most of the time you might not have to worry about so much creature removal because you're going to be overwhelming them with your creatures.
Yeah, almost all the time. I think if I build it correctly, it's just I'm worried about zombies, and then maybe some big green creature builds.
Goblins, you mean, right? Yeah.
Did I say toe to
You
toe
said
with
zombies,
zombies?
but
Yeah,
you meant you were
goblins.
worried about goblins, right?
I'm worried about goblins. Yeah, as we all should be. Call to the Grave. That was my second follow up. Now we're going to get into segment 1. It's the only official segment of episode 65 of the Omen Magic podcast. Segment 1 is all about Zombie Infestation. This card came up briefly when we were looking at a deck list last episode. You did ask if we talked about it last episode, Alex. You were right. It was in one of the deck lists. I don't remember which one. It was just sitting there. It might have just been in a sideboard, actually. Can't remember. But I wanted to go a little bit deeper on this card. I didn't talk much about it at the time, last episode, because I was focused just on the creatures. And this is an enchantment.
Yeah,
But
I think we maybe weren't super overwhelmed by it at first, and we were talking about maybe just being conditional, using it with something when you want to discard on purpose or as a sideboard card, like you said. But I guess you found that it is more used than we thought, or
well, I don't know if it's more used than I thought, but it did at different points in its history get heavy use in certain types of decks.
okay.
And it was first printed in Odyssey, October 1st, 2001. It's an uncommon from Odyssey. It was also printed in Premium Deck Series Graveborn, Magic 2012, Jumpstart, Arch Enemy, Commander 2019, and Dominaria Remastered. Dominaria Remastered might have been the first time that I ever saw it when we were looking through all the reprints when Dominaria Remastered came out. It's 1 colorless, 1 black enchantment. Discard 2 cards from your hand, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token into play. Had a rating of 4.067 on Gatherer. Current market price of 59 cents. It's an uncommon. It's been printed many, many times. It's a cheap card, which I like, and it's also played a key role in multiple competitive decks over the years. I found some of those competitive decks that were built with Zombie Infestation that go all the way back to 2001 when this card was first printed. And while they contain Zombie Infestation, like you mentioned earlier, Alex, they're not really there to power a zombie creature horde strategy. These early decks really use this for its discard ability to power a reanimator-based strategy. So Zombie Infestation was used as one of multiple cards in these reanimator decks that they used to fill up their graveyard. So I'm going to go all the way back to Pro Tour New Orleans 2001. Back in that tournament, 2 different decks finished in the top 8. Both those decks were just named Mono Black Reanimator. One was piloted by somebody named Darwin Castle, another by David, I'm going to say Humphreys. I think it's Humphreys. It's spelled, at least on MTG top 8, Humphreys, which is not how I would spell Humphreys. But I'm also going to assume maybe his last name is not Humphreys, because that's not a last name I've heard before. So let's go with David Humphreys, Alex. What do you think?
Okay. Apologies if we're wrong.
Those 2 mono black reanimator decks, they're almost the same damn deck. I'm going to pull those decks up now. So we're going to start by looking at the version from David Humphreys. I pulled this up on our Mox field. We got our Old Man Magic Mox field with Mono Black Reanimator by David Humphreys. He played it at Pro Tour New Orleans 2001. What do we got in this deck, Alex? Well, this deck has creatures. It has big creatures and creatures that come back from the graveyard.
I like it already.
I know,
Avatar
it's pretty-
Woe and Verdant Force. Yeah.
7 creatures. Avatar Woe. This is a 6 colorless, 2 black, 6/5 creature avatar. If there are 10 or more creature cards total in all graveyards, Avatar Woe costs 6 colorless less to play. So if you can get your creatures in your graveyard, cost 2 black to play this 6/5, but also you only have 7 creatures in this deck. So I don't know how you're going to get 10 or more creatures in your graveyard, so forget about that. Avatar Woe can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures. And you can also tap it to destroy a target creature, and that creature can't be regenerated. So you could attack for 6 with this fella, this lady, who knows? Or you can use it to pick off any big baddies that your opponent might have out.
Mhm.
You're running 2 Krovikan Horror. This is a card that I bought fairly early on when we started buying cards again, like a year and a half ago. I was like, oh, I could probably do some fun things with Krovikan Horror. I find it to be like 2 mana hungry for what it does, though. 3 colorless, 1 black, 2/2 summon horror. At the end of any turn, if Krovikan Horror is in your graveyard with a summon card directly above it, you can put the horror back into your hand, pay 1 colorless, sacrifice a creature to have Krovikan Horror deal 1 damage to target creature or player. That's the thing that I really liked about it. I remember why I bought this card, because when I first got back into Magic, I was like, I want to build a deck. I kept seeing all sorts of decks that had cool sacrifice effects. So I thought I'm going to build a sacrifice effect deck. And I just ended up with like 50 different cards that had some effect when you sacrificed things. But I'm like, you can't build a deck like this. I have so much shit that I need to sacrifice creatures to. I don't even have that many creatures. I can only play so many Singular Artifact. What's it called?
A Singular
Autocrats.
Autocrat?
I almost said Singular Artifact, which, if they haven't made that yet, they should.
Yeah.
3rd creature.
It could be like some like vampire dentures.
That would actually be good equipment. It would be good equipment. Watch. Morrow needs to listen to this podcast, man. We give him so many good ideas.
I know.
Usually for his unglued sets. 3rd creature, Multani Morrow Sorcerer, 4 colorless, 2 green, star. Summon Legend. Multani has power and toughness each equal to the total number of cards in all players' hands. Has Shroud. Cannot be the target of spells or abilities. So he can get big. Nether Spirit, 1 colorless, 2 black, 2/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Nether Spirit is the only creature card in your graveyard, you may return Nether Spirit to play. It has a Squee, Goblin Nabob, 2 colorless, 1 red, 1/1. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Squee is in your graveyard, you may return Squee to your hand, and it has a Verdant Force, the original Timmy card, 5 colorless, 3 green, 7/7. During each player's upkeep, put a sapling token into play. Treat this token as a 1/1 green creature.
I have a question immediately.
So this is the creature pool. I just want to say a couple things. They're big creatures and creatures that come back from the graveyard. So that's kind of what you need to know about these creatures. What's your one question?
Okay, so with Squee and Nether Spirit, the 2 of them together, let's say both of those cards are in your graveyard.
You're asking me a rules question, Alex.
Yeah, this is a rules question for you. Right
the answer is going to be, I don't know.
Okay. So they both say at the beginning of your upkeep.
Yeah.
Okay. Which makes me think that you might be able to choose which one happens first.
That would be my default answer. That would be my belief too, but I don't know.
Which means, sorry.
That's what I would think too, but I don't know for fact. But that's how I would think they would operate.
Okay, so then if you have these 2 in your graveyard together, you can make Squee come back to your hand first, and then Nether Spirit's ability will still trigger because it will be the only creature in your graveyard then. Maybe.
I am not a judge, but I think that's how it would happen. This will be a follow-up for the next episode. We need to find the answer to this for sure.
Because I'm already seeing maybe some interesting, like, effects between some of these cards and their, what's going on with
Nether Spirit, if in the graveyard at the same time.
We don't have to get into it too much now. I didn't mean to derail you from the.
Well, I'm not going to now. I'm taking notes though.
Okay.
I know there are several people on come across some people who are judges on Twitter. And one of them, at least one of them, had like a little like a donation link. And you could ask them questions.
That's a good idea. That's nice.
I gotta take advantage of that. I gotta find some judges out there, reasonable amount of money. I don't want to pay like $10 to get a question answered because I can't keep doing that. But if anybody out there would like answer a question for like $2 or something, I'll have questions for you every week. Rules
That
questions.
seems generous to me too. If I was a judge on Twitter or someone who did this, and I was on Twitter and people wanted to just like pay me $2 to ask a question, I'd be like, hell yeah. 50 cents, Steve.
I mean, that would be even better, 50 cents, but like I will drop $2 just to get a question answered, a rules question.
Anyways, back to the deck.
Anyways, those are the creatures, big creatures and creatures that come back from the graveyard. There's also sorceries and instants. What do we have to know about these sorceries and instants? Well, mostly they're graveyard spells and tutors. So there's Buried Alive. Sorcery, 2 colors, 1 black. Search your library for up to 3 creature cards. Put them in your graveyard. Shuffle your library after. So this is how you go through your deck. You find your creatures, your big creatures. You put them in your graveyard. There's Duress, which is just to disrupt your opponent's hand, to get rid of any Swords to Plowshares or counter spells that might be hiding in there. There's Exhume. So the cards you just put in your graveyard, you need to get them out of your damn graveyard in order for them to do something. Each player chooses a creature card in his or her graveyard and puts that creature into play. So yes, your opponent gets to take something out of their graveyard too, but also your opponent probably didn't just put a Verdant Force in their graveyard on the second turn. So
right,
you're probably going to come out ahead in that interaction. There's Massacre. 2 colorless, 2 black. Sorcery. If an opponent controls a plains and you control a swamp, you may play Massacre without paying its mana cost. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn.
Okay.
With this deck, your creatures are either big or if they're small, they come back to you anyway. So
right,
you don't care about that. And you probably didn't have Pyroclasm. Well, you don't have Pyroclasm in black. Now this deck does splash a little bit of red. It has Squee, but you didn't have. I don't know if you had Pyroclasm in this meta. This is an extended deck, by the way. Which extended was type, it was the 1 point something.
Yeah, like 1 point. Okay.
I don't remember if when extended exists, you could go back indefinitely. Like this is a Nemesis card. At the time extended existed. Could you play Nemesis with Ice Age cards? I bet not, because I see no like Dance of the Dead here. Ice Age was probably out of extended at this point, I'm guessing. I'm bringing this up because I'm thinking, why not play a Pyroclasm? But I think this was probably like the best thing to do this in the meta at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Reanimate. 1 black sorcery, put target creature card from any graveyard into play under your control. Lose life equal to that creature's total casting costs. Let's say you have an Exhume in your hand and they do have something great in their graveyard that you don't want them to get. You can reanimate it first.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it into your side of the battlefield, then play Exhume.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Instance. Here's Vampiric Tutor. I mentioned Tutor. And Entomb, which is 1 black instant. Search your library for a card. Put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. And then you got your enchantments. Animate Dead, again, to bring back stuff from your graveyard. Contamination, which you love, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever a land is tapped for mana, it produces black instead of its normal type and amount. And then you got your Zombie Infestation. You got 4 Zombie Infestations. Discard 2 cards from your hand. Put a 2/2 black zombie creature token into play. For lands, you just got the swamp and you just got Rishadon Port. I was talking about red. Did I say there were dual lands in this deck? If I did, there are no dual lands in this deck.
I don't
I was
think you
talking
said
about, huh? I didn't. I was just thinking
don't
in my
think-
head, then I didn't say it out loud. I was saying red. There's actually no red spells he intends on casting with this deck. Squee is just you use black spells to get Squee in your graveyard, and then it just comes back
Yeah.
to your hand. It's just swamps and Rishadon Port, so you're only hard casting black spells. You got your green cards here, but again, they're just for two big beefy creatures to get in your graveyard and then to animate them from your graveyard.
Yeah.
So cool deck. I've never played anything like this. I've never played with the graveyard really, but I do love big beefy creatures and I do love recursion. Things you can do over and over again. So I probably should get into building a graveyard deck. The sideboard, Terror, Perish to deal with green stompy, big green creatures, Bone Shredder, another way to kill creatures, Ascendant Evincer, Evinkar. How do I pronounce this word? Evincer?
I think it's Evinkar, but maybe I'm
Evinkar.
totally...
Flying other black creatures get +1/+1. Non-black creatures get -0, -1/-1. So it's a lot of ways to deal with opponents' creatures in this sideboard. Coffin Purge. I'm not familiar with this one. That's 1 black instant. Remove target card in a graveyard from the game. So that makes sense. Maybe again, if they have something that you don't want them to exhume when you cast exhume, you can remove it. This could also be something for the mirror match. You know, we had 2 reanimator decks like this in the top 8. Assuming he's going to be facing lots of reanimator probably in this meta. Put some Coffin Purge in there to try to ruin your opponent's plans. Null Rod. Players cannot play any artifact abilities requiring an activation cost. Who knows what that was in there for? Probably, again, a meta-specific card choice. But that's a good card choice for the sideboard in a lot of different metas.
I wonder when they put the Phyrexian Negator in.
I was just going to say Phyrexian Negator. I don't want to talk about why this is in here because I'm not sure. We mentioned the Negator briefly in the last episode where I'm like, I don't know how to play the Negator. It scares me.
Okay, well, in a graveyard deck, sacrificing your permanents won't be so bad. Okay.
It won't be so bad depending on how much damage they do to it. And you know what? You don't have a lot of permanents in this deck. It's a lot of spells. Now, I wouldn't want to sacrifice my Zombie Infestation necessarily. That would kind of hurt if it disappeared. But if if your 7 creatures are on the board, in addition to the Phyrexian Negator, somebody bolts your Negator and you have to get rid of a couple creatures, you can bring them back with another spell, or maybe they can just come back to your hand depending on what they are.
If it's like Squee, he's just coming back.
Yeah.
The thing is, you don't want to lose your lands to the Phyrexian Negator. You know, you don't want to have to sacrifice them. So you have to make sure you have enough stuff out that can be. So what I'm wondering is maybe he plays it against a deck that doesn't like do a lot of damage. You know what I mean? Like if I'm playing you and your deck has removal, but it's like, Swords to Plowshares type removal, and maybe it's creatureless or something like that. Then I'm not worried about the Phyrexian Negator taking damage directly.
Yeah, why not? If you're just playing a blue-white control deck, playing against a blue-white control deck, what kind of direct damage are they going to hit this with?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably when it comes in. This is David Humphrey's version. Big creatures that come from the graveyard. Sorceries and instants that do some disruption, kill some opponents, tutor, and then either get things into your graveyard or bring things back from your graveyard. You got your Zombie Infestation, which gets things into your graveyard and generates some zombies for you. And then Contamination. This is probably just against decks that don't play black. I mean, if you get the Contamination down, they're screwed. Yeah,
it's a pretty big choker.
So just, I guess, put one in your black deck if you're playing a mono black deck, essentially. Put one in.
Looking with not to change topics, but with the Krovokian Horror, you have a way to reliably keep doing some direct damage if you want.
Yes. Yeah, with the creatures that come back like Nether Spirit and Squee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks fun. I like how there's splashes of different color creatures because he doesn't have to hard cast them. It makes
Yeah, I like
it
the
some variety
3-color.
in the deck.
I like the
Uh,
3-color monocolor deck.
mhm.
Enjoyable.
It's easy to do with graveyard stuff and sacrificing or tutoring type effects. It's nice.
We're gonna look at Darwin Castle's mono black reanimator. Also played at Proto New Orleans 2001. Very, very similar. 8 creatures instead of 7. Same creatures,
Same creatures.
except Croesus the Purger.
Now this can't just be like someone organically brewed this same deck with those same creatures. You know what
I
I
think
mean?
they were team members.
Oh, okay.
I don't know for sure, but I think they might have been team members. Croesus the Purger's 3 colorless, 1 blue, 1 black, 1 red. 6/6 flying, legendary dragon from Invasion. We did a whole episode on that shit, Alex. Maybe like episode 3 or 4 of the podcast. I don't remember. When Croesus the Purger deals combat damage to a player, you may pay 2 colorless, 1 black. If you do, choose a color. That player reveals his or her hand and discards all cards of that color from it. One of the best legendary dragons from Invasion.
He's good.
Darwin Castle has 1 more buried alive. And Darwin Castle has 1 less animate dead and 1 less swamp.
Okay.
And no Rishadon ports. Does that make sense? $21 lands. Two less swamps. No, what the hell?
Yeah. It 21 swamps. This one has 19 plus 3 Rashadons.
Okay, so 1 less land. 21 lands total. I wrote 1 less swamp on the show notes and I confused myself. So they're pretty much the same deck. I would always prefer the one with a legendary dragon in it. If you have 2 decks that are almost the same and one of them has a legendary dragon in it, I'm going for the one with the gold, but that's just me.
I can definitely see wanting to get the buried alive, like for sure.
I like that actually.
3 to 4.
That's the thing that I like most about the change here. I like the 4 buried alives as opposed to the 3.
I'm wondering about the like what the deal is with Animate Dead, like why it's here specifically. If it's just like he needed 1, like he already had 4 exhumes and 4 reanimates, so he needed something else.
That's
or
what
if
I
there's
think.
Something more specific about it.
That's what I thought. Maybe they just felt like they needed an additional reanimation spell, or maybe in the other case of the other deck, 2 additional reanimation spells. But there could be something that I don't know about, something that was going on in the meta at the time that made them specifically want this card. I don't know. So these are 2 reanimator decks. They're zombie infestation decks, but they're really reanimator decks. I've never played a reanimator deck. They seem straightforward, but I'm sure there's a lot of intricacies and stuff that go into building them and playing them on a high level. How do you put together a reanimation deck? Probably. Well, I'm assuming you want creatures. You need creatures if you're running a reanimator deck. What kind of creatures do you choose? I would say whatever's legal at the time, you go for the biggest bodies. They've definitely done that. You see some huge bodies here. Avatar Woe, Verdant Force, Multani, Croesus. I also like Multani in a deck like this that has cards that come back to your hand,
Mm-hmm.
It can keep your hand size at a certain level. Also, you probably want some utility creatures too. Some creatures that have some sort of effect that is important for you in the meta. Maybe things that can perform creature removal, like Krovikan Horror, like you said. You could pay your colorless, sacrifice creatures like Squee to consistently do 1 damage with Krovikan Horror to a creature or a player. You can ping manimals. You can ping your opponent. You can sacrifice more than one creature if you need to do extra damage. So this is a utility creature. What utility creatures you want to run will vary depending on what decks are biggest at the time. Other than the creatures, what else do you want? Well, this is also obvious. Spells to get cards into your graveyard. We got that in Entomb. We got that in Buried Alive. Another way to get cards into your graveyard, spells that allow you to discard things. We got that in Zombie Infestation. I love Zombie Infestation really in this deck because it does two things you really want. I mean, it does the thing you want it to do, which is to get something into your graveyard. And in addition to that, it just gives you a bonus zombie that you can sacrifice to Krovikan Horror.
Yeah, you're turning the downside into an advantage. So now it has two advantages.
Two advantages. And then what else do you probably want to do if you're building a reanimation deck? Well, you need those spells to reanimate things. You want to find the lowest casting cost reanimation spells you can get, and as many of them as you can get. So that's, in my mind, probably why they went 4 reanimates, which are 1 black, 4 entombs. Well, sorry, this isn't a reanimation spell. 4 reanimates, which are 1 black, 4 exhumes, which are 1 colorless, 1 black, and then an additional animate dead, which is 1 colorless, 1 black. These aren't the only reanimation spells that exist, but they're the lowest casting cost ones. I don't think there's another one like reanimate that's just 1 black.
Just unearth, as far as I know, but that has to be a creature with casting cost of 3 or less, right?
Don't even remember. Alex with the deep cuts. You're becoming an encyclopedia of pre-modern Magic cards.
No.
Yes.
I have like 5 black cards that I keep using.
That's your job. Oh, we just talked about this one.
Yeah.
I remember the art now, and is the illustrator Hazeltine? Hazeltine? Choose target creature card in your graveyard with total casting cost 3 or less and put that creature into play. Yeah, so that's not going to be great for a cool card, and it's a cycler, but it's not going to be great if you're going the big fatty reanimation strategy.
Yeah. This is better for like small things that have like an enter the battlefield effect or something, you know?
I like the fact that both of these decks also have some cards that don't need to be reanimated. You know, creatures specifically that don't need to be reanimated. They can come back. I think you mentioned that already. Nether Spirit, Squee, even the Krovikan Horror can come back, although it has to have a summon card directly above it. I have a question for you that I don't know the answer to, Alex. I don't know if you'll know the answer to it either, but it's something that popped into my head when I was looking at the cards, the selected cards in these 2 decks. When it comes to reanimate specifically, I mean, this is your fastest reanimation spell. This is the one you can cast the quickest. It's just 1 black. But do you want to reanimate like your big fatties? This is a whole the reanimation deck is built around getting a huge creature with a high casting cost into your graveyard early on and then getting it onto the battlefield with a reanimation spell. But reanimate specifically says you lose life equal to that creature's total casting cost. Yeah. So you get your Verdant Force in your graveyard right away, and then you reanimate them, but you lose 8 life.
Yeah.
And what if they just cast Terror or something on it? It scares me. I wrote a question. Do you think reanimate's reserved for Squee, Nether Spirit, Krovikan Horror? That's stupid. I don't even know why I wrote that question. Those can all come back to your hand. So the answer is no to that. But I mean,
you might still want to reanimate them, even though they can come back to your hand. You know, you might want to put them right into play instead of bring them to your hand. And
that's true.
You know,
that's true.
I tend to look at reanimate as really useful for stealing my opponent's graveyard creatures.
Yeah.
So you like so duress doesn't work on creatures. I always have to look at that to check. How else are you filling their graveyard with creatures? Avatar of Woe.
Yeah, but you got to get this out first. And
I'm just thinking like what your removal options are in here. How are you gonna get
I
creatures into their graveyard for you to reanimate.
I think
Massacre.
I think the way the best reanimation decks work is there's not a lot of creatures in your opponent's graveyard because they need to work. Ideally, they work fast. You get something really big into your graveyard very early, and then you get it onto the battlefield very early. So,
Right.
like, there's not going to be a lot in your opponent's graveyard.
Well,
to
if
even
you're making
take.
them discard it or mill it or something, you know.
But you don't have a lot of options to do that in this deck. So you have
No, no,
duress.
that's why I was like
Yeah.
looking. I was like,
Duress is non-creature.
yeah.
So
yeah,
I
I don't know.
guess I have to see people play these, but I guess they just they face the pain. You just take it, and then hope. Yeah,
I mean, it
you
might
get
be worth it if you can do, Croesus right off the bat. You know what I mean?
it. Definitely will be worth it sometimes. Yeah, I guess this is what you do. You duress their hand and make sure they don't have a Swords to Plowshares or a Terror. Terror won't work on Croesus. Make sure they don't have a Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah.
If they have a Terror, you reanimate Croesus or Avatar Woe instead of Verdant Force.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Verdant Force is probably the only one you like really don't want to do.
It's the worst. It would be the worst one to
Avatar.
reanimate.
Avatar was the same cost. They're both 8. Yeah.
Yeah, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, that's a lot. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of questions. I'd like to ask questions for the people that built these decks.
But I have to play Reanimator. I'm sure sometimes probably you reanimate something huge and then it doesn't work out for you. You lose a ton of life and they get rid of it somehow. And then you're like, shit. But you're not dead. You still have an opportunity the next couple turns to bring out something else really big,
I mean, it's good for stealing like smaller power utility creatures from them. You could take like a meddling mage out of their graveyard or something like that with it.
It has to get there first, though, and there's not a lot of ways to put it there here. That's the thing.
I'm wondering.
That's the thing. Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, reanimate is fun to use to steal from your opponent's graveyard, especially in Commander when you have 3 different graveyards to select from. But here, I think, this is really focused on, I think, pulling their own stuff from their graveyard, getting into their graveyard as soon as possible, and getting onto the battlefield from their graveyard as soon as possible. And the fastest way to do that is reanimate. But yeah, you lose a lot of life. It's obviously still a great card, though. People play it like crazy. And it's just 1 mana. Anyways, these are 2 Zombie Infestation decks that are really Reanimator decks. They use the Zombie Infestation to power that reanimation strategy. There's another deck from the same era that paired Zombie Infestation with another card that benefits from discarding cards. That other card that benefits from discarding cards is Wild Mongrel. Remember this one, Alex?
I think so, yeah.
It's a mongrel. It's from Odyssey. 1 colorless, 1 green, 2/2. Discard a card from your hand. Wild Mongrel gets +1/+1 and becomes the color of your choice until end of turn.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So this was put into a deck called Wild Zombies by Rob Daughtry. Grand Prix Las Vegas 2001. And with this deck, you have 3 cards that can do the damn thing when you have a handful of cards you can discard. One is Wild Mongrel, which we just showed, gets pluses when you discard cards. The other is Firestorm. 1 red instant, choose and discard X cards. Firestorm deals X damage to each of X target creatures and/or players. And then the third is Zombie Infestation. Discard 2 cards from your hand, put a 2/2 black zombie creature into play. So it's all about getting things in your hand, discarding them to different spells, to different creatures. This deck has more creatures in it than the last deck we saw. The last deck was just about playing small number of very big creatures. Here we have more of a variety. 24 creatures in total. Ashen Ghoul, which is 3 colorless, 1 red, 3/1. We talked about this in one of our zombie episodes.
Mm-hmm.
The ghoul can attack the turn it comes into play. You can play just 1 black, return Ashen Ghoul to play under your control. Use this ability only at the end of your upkeep and only if Ashen Ghoul is in your graveyard with at least 3 creature cards above it. Elvish Spirit Guide, which is a 2/2 for 2 colorless and 1 green. You can remove it from the game to add a green to your mana pool. This is what most people use it for. They use it for ramp, not as a 2/2 for 3. The Hermit Druid, which is a very good utility creature. They can do all sorts of broken things. 1 colorless, 1 green, 1/1. Pay 1 green, tap, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land card. Put that card into your hand. Put all of the revealed cards into your graveyard. There's only 3 basic lands in this deck. This, Alex, was why I was thinking there was dual lands in the deck. So this one has dual lands. 4 Krovikan Horrors. This guy can come back to your hand. Also deal damage. 4 Squeeze can come back to your hand. 4 Wild Mongrels. You have sorceries. 1 Buried Alive, 4 Duress. Instants. You have the Vampiric Tutor for tutoring. Firestorm we talked about. Emerald Charm. I'm assuming this was in here just for the enchantment effect. Untap target permanent or destroy target global enchantment or target creature loses flying until end of turn. It seems like the enchantment removal would be the most useful effect that you can get out of this card. But who knows? Maybe there were a lot of blue-white skies decks or something at tournaments around this time. And somebody would try to fly over and kill you. But you could just Emerald Charm their flyer and then pitch a bunch of cards to your Wild Mongrel and eat it up. I don't know. I'm guessing it's the enchantment removal, though. And then Phyrexian Furnace. Tap to remove the bottom card of target player's graveyard from the game. I mean, this was in 2001. The last 2 decks we saw, reanimation decks, 2001. There was probably a lot of graveyard stuff going on around this time. So it probably wasn't a bad idea to have a Phyrexian Furnace or 2 in your main board to start eating away at the graveyard as quickly as possible. And then this is an extended deck. So you got 4 Bayous, 4 Badlands, 4 Taigas, 4 Llanowar Wastes, 1 City of Brass, 3 Swamps. Back in the day, could have built this mana base for $75. Now, never.
Never.
Never. So, how do you play this deck? You repeatedly generate a large hand size, then pitch the cards to fuel Wild Mongrel, Zombie Infestation, to a lesser extent, Firestorm. How do you generate hand size? You do that by getting cards that can be brought back to your hand using just the abilities they have into your graveyard with Hermit Druid and Buried Alive. This is how I think you play this deck. So you get Hermit Druid out, you tap them, you're going to just fill up your graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to fill it up. The goal you can bring back and attack with haste with just 1 black in a lot of instances. Krovikan Horror can come back in a lot of instances. Squeak can always come back.
Mm-hmm.
You probably want the Duress in there to remove counter spells, remove opponent's removal. You can use Firestorm to help clear the way for your big mongrel attacker too.
I like the
Pump up the
Firestorm.
mongrel attack.
I like that this has 4 Squeeze in it.
4 Squeeze. So not the style of deck that I'm used to playing, similar to the reanimation deck. Not the kind of thing I ever really played, but it looks really fun. I want to give it a spin.
This one seems more about, like you said, like reanimating into your hand to like buff up your hand size so that you can do firestorms or Wild Mongrel effect.
It seems more complicated.
I
think I'd need to test this one out more often before I can get like consistently good at playing it. What do you not want to do? You definitely don't want to turn your hermit sideways unless you have at least a wild mongrel in your hand, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't want to put like all my mongrels into the graveyard. You only have 3 swamps to stop that hermit. And you have no way to stack the order of your library in any way. Oh, well, no, Vampiric Druid or just put something on the top. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Yeah, you probably don't want to start using the Hermit Druid until you have the right things in your hand.
But you have 4 mongrels, 4 hermit druids, and 4 tutors.
Mm-hmm.
So you could probably get the right things in your hand fairly consistently and not have to wait too long.
Yeah.
Anyways. Cool deck. Sideboard. Another Phyrexian Furnace and a Ground Seal. Again, just further strengthens my thought that tons of graveyard stuff in the meta at the time. So you got to have different ways to deal with it. More Emerald Charms, probably more enchantments. The Call of the Herd is a weird one to me. Why put 4 Call of the Herd in your sideboard to bring elephant tokens into play? Don't know. But anyways.
I mean, I see how it works. I just don't understand why it's a situational play.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out too. Like, in what case are you like, okay, what I need to sideboard in is Call of the Herd? Not entirely. I'm not really sure about that. We got to play these against one another. I want to play Wild Zombies. I got to give this a few spins.
Yeah, I'm excited to try this deck. This looks like fun.
These are some older decks from the early 2000s, from the time Zombie Infestation was first printed. I also found some more recent ones. I mean, we're not talking modern decks here or anything. They're pre-modern builds. They were built more recently using Zombie Infestation. I want to talk about a couple of the cool ones I saw. Those 3 were all old extended format decks. More recently, wanted to know, what have people been doing with Zombie Infestation and Premodern? There was one actually that was featured on the premodernmtg.com website. And this one was named Zombie Spark. So in this case, we're no longer in extended, so you couldn't build it like Wild Zombies with a bunch of different dual lands. They pared it down to 2 colors because the mana base is just more difficult in Premodern. It's more heavy on discard. So you have 4 Duress, 4 Cabal Therapies. And how does it kill? Well, I think it kills by generating zombie tokens with Zombie Infestation, attacking with Hasty Ashen Ghouls, plus direct damage that you can generate with Death Spark and Firestorm, and also Krovikan Horror. So this one has 16 creatures.
I like how this goes. Sorry.
4 Squee, 4 Nether Shadows, 4 Krovikan Horrors, 4 Ashen Ghouls. Hasty Attacker, direct damage.
You keep
Nether
going.
Shadow. Talk again. Squee Goblin above. I'm done. What were you saying?
I was just gonna say I like how it goes all in on the creatures that come back if there are other creatures like above them.
Yeah. Death Spark is a card that we haven't seen. I mean, I kind of remember it from Alliances, but it wasn't in any of the decks we talked about so far. It's 1 red instant. Death Spark deals 1 damage to target creature or player at the end of your upkeep. If Death Spark is in your graveyard with a creature card directly above it, you may pay 1 colorless to put Death Spark into your hand.
All right.
So I feel like you're probably going to be able to do a lot of damage with the Death Spark over and over.
Yeah, you just keep doing it with all your extra mana. once a turn.
So I thought this one was pretty cool. Actually, if I play any of these decks, I'm probably going to start with this one because I think this would probably be the easiest one for me to get my head around at the moment.
Yeah,
Like
the
at
creatures
beginning.
just come back on their own. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And then there was another interesting build. This one I found on tcdex.net. It was called Zombie Still, and it was built by Phil Wynn and played in the Premodern Spring Fling 2021, not the Premodern Spring Fling. That doesn't exist. This is a typo. Let me fix this right here live on the show. Premodern Spring Fling. This one was very different, and I will say that this was at one time, at the time it was built, a pre-modern legal deck. It is no longer a pre-modern legal deck. The still in Zombie Still comes from Land Still. This is essentially a Land Still deck that is also essentially a Land Tax Scroll Rack Mox Diamond deck. This is why it's no longer legal, because Land Tax has been banned. So, this was a card draw engine that you could just pretty much put into any shell. So he fitted into this deck. But even though you can't do that any longer, I like this idea of playing Standstill. I keep saying Land Still. The card is Standstill, but it's in a deck often called Land Still.
Yeah.
Standstill. I really like the idea of playing Standstill with Zombie Infestation. Standstill is enchantment, one colorless, one blue. When a player plays a spell, sacrifice Standstill. If you do, each of that player's opponents draws 3 cards. So Standstill hits the board. Nobody wants to be the first person to do something because you're the first person to play a spell. I say do something, but specifically play a spell. You're the first person to play a spell. You're giving card advantage to your opponent. If you get Standstill down and you have a card like Zombie Infestation, where you can continuously advance your board state without actually having to play a spell.
Yeah.
You're almost forcing your opponent into breaking the Standstill and giving you card draw.
Yep.
So I thought that was a really cool idea, and I'd like to see this played around with in the absence of this Scroll Rack Mox Land Tax Mox Diamond combo. This deck has all the stuff, really. It's got the Zombie Infestation Standstill pairing. It's got this now banned Land Tax Scroll Rack Mox Diamond combo. It's got removal in Swords to Plowshares and Discard and Duress. It's got some counter spells, Arcane Denial, Mana Leak. What's this? Intuition? Is this just plain a straight up card draw? I can't remember. Search your library for any 3 cards and reveal them to target opponent. He or she chooses one. Put that card in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. Shuffle your library afterwards. That's what it is, not card draw. Help you find what you need. I'm guessing most of the time people play this card, they use it to go get something they have 3 or 4 of in their deck that they really want, so that you definitely have to get one of them.
Yeah.
Or you could use it to pull one thing you really want. What if all the things you really want can also come back from your graveyard? Then you can just
That's
get
what I was
3
gonna
of them.
say. Like, yeah, if you
Use it to get 3 squeeze.
Yeah, if you pull out some squeeze, like then, or like 2 squeeze and another card, and then they have to decide, like, oh, what should I do?
But yeah, I would like to play around with this. Like, just try to could you make just a straight up blue black Zombie Still deck that can maybe compete with some of today's blue white Land Still decks, which seem to be doing very, very well in the pre-modern tournament environment.
And you could use Gem Palm Polluter too.
Yeah.
To get around the Standstill.
Yeah. That would be fun. Zombie Infestation, Gem Palm Polluter, Standstill. Is there something else you can use to generate zombie tokens as well? Like something else that isn't a spell? What are all the different ways you can advance your board state? without playing a spell. Cycling, that's not playing a spell. Can't be countered because it's not playing a spell.
Yeah. Yeah, no, things that generate tokens, like you said. I keep forgetting his name. The cleric zombie that makes the 2/2 zombies.
Rotlung Reanimator?
Yeah, yeah. I wonder why I always forget that guy's name.
I don't know. You played him against me, and
I
it
know,
was
I know,
terrible.
I know. Like I have the card in some of my decks. I can never remember Rotlung for some
It's
reason.
in my brain because I'm scarred. I was abused by the Rotlung
So if you have
Reanimator.
things that sacrifice once they're already in play, you get something down. Or you could do things like contagion or something like that where you're pitching cards to play the well, no, contagion, you'd still be
It's
casting
still a
the
spell.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
it's an alternative casting cost.
but like festering goblins maybe, or like other things like that do something when they die. Could help you out when the standstill has things locked down.
Yeah. But basic land still, like I have never really gone deep into a land still deck, never really gone
I've
over
seen
a
them.
land still deck.
I've
Yeah.
seen some deck lists, yeah.
And I've never played one. But I mean, the idea is just a blue-white control shell, and you have lands like Mishra's Factory, for instance, and you would just attack through that.
Yeah,
Don't play
mainlands.
spells. But here you got cards to discard repeatedly. You got an enchantment that generates creatures for you when you discard those cards. You got mainlands. I think there's some interesting opportunities here, potentially just for a straight up blue-black zombie still deck. Forget about all this fancy stuff, even though it's great. Can't do it anymore. It's too broken. The powers that be said no.
Yeah.
They waited for me to buy my 3 land taxes, and then they were like, shut it down. Shut it down. We see it.
I
didn't buy my 4th.
Buy the Mox Diamonds, but then you could still use them.
Well, I didn't buy my 4th land tax, so that was good. I wasn't actually preparing to buy a Mox Diamond, although there is, I don't know if it's still there, but there was one at a local shop, like in really great condition, just for $400, which is not a bad price. I don't know what they're going for now, but it wasn't a bad price at all at the time. That's a shitload of money still.
You can make a blue-red goblin standstill deck.
Tell me more. What do you do?
Gem Palm Incinerator. What's that one goblin you have that brings guys into play?
I don't know. I don't think there is one.
I thought you had a goblin that brought guys into play.
There's the Siege Gang Commander. He comes into play with additional like 1/1 goblins. He brings
Maybe that's
in.
what I was thinking.
You need to play him still, so he's a spell.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's just Incinerator. So you would need to establish a board state first and then play land still.
Okay.
But really, most of the time, you just probably want to continue to establish a board state, build it up even more, put more goblins out there.
Yeah.
But anywho, it was a couple reanimator decks, Wild Zombies, which was apparently a well-known deck from back in the day. We've now learned about. And then we saw a couple pre-modern builds, Zombie Spark, which I really liked, and Zombie Still, which I think I liked even more, even though you can't play it in this form. But like, I guess I don't know if I like this deck necessarily more because you can't play it any longer. But I'm more interested in trying to brew around the possibilities of this black-blue
cool.
Zombie Still
Yeah, that's a cool combo. I'd mess with that.
And then that's all I have for the day today, Alex. It was just one extended segment all about Zombie Infestation. I want to say, if you've made it this long, thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please subscribe to Old Men Magic on YouTube. If you just like listening to us, if you don't want to look at us, if you don't want to see all the cards we're showing, all the deck lists we're showing on YouTube, and you want to do Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we're also available there. You can click subscribe on those platforms too. I mean, I would suggest YouTube because this is a very visual show. It's not just Alex. It's not just my beautiful face and Alex's beautiful face. We also show decks. We show cards, art. Sometimes I accidentally show my email addresses, personal email addresses, stuff like that.
Financial
desk-
statements.
my desktop, stock portfolios. But if you haven't already yet, give us a subscribe, please. Give us a rating. Like us on YouTube. No dislikes, likes only. If you rate
Likes
us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, 5 stars only. Any less than 5 stars, we find out who you are. We come after you. Alex, you have any words of wisdom to leave the listeners with before we head out for the night?
No, I
Not
don't think so.
prepared. Alex has no words of wisdom.
No wisdom.
I don't have any either. So I'm just going to say, talk to y'all next week.
Thank you.
Am I frozen? No, I'm not. I'm just pretending to be frozen.